Full house. Okay, call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the clerk please take attendance?
All council members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Action to approve the agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any comments from the public? Comments from council? Questions? Please call the roll.
Rasmussen,
Aye.
Specker, Tiltonberg,
Aye.
Wendell, Avery, Dorn. Aye. Niemeyer.
Aye. Okay, go on to item number 4, budget workshop number 2. Jake Meshi, our deputy city manager, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. We are here for our budget workshop number 2 as part of our budget workshop series in the 2025 budget process. For tonight's meeting, you'll notice we are going to be covering the 10-year capital improvement plan as well as the consolidated fee schedule. Previously at our September 10th meeting, we gave an overview of the budget, specifically focusing on the operating budget, outside agencies, and the 10-year financial plan. We do have an additional date scheduled for October 8th as optional. We would look for direction from council if there are specific topics they would like staff to provide more in-depth look at as it relates to the 2025 budget. As far as the official adoption process of the budget goes, we've already had our first and second readings on the property tax levy ordinance, which was approved. We'll have the first reading of the budget ordinance on October 22nd, and then on November 12th, we'll have the second reading of the budget ordinance, as well as the adoption of the 10-year capital improvement plan and the consolidated fee schedule. Before you tonight is an overview of what we will cover in tonight's workshop. This is a slide from last time as well, just as a reminder for council and members of the public. As a reminder, your general fund is your primary operating fund, which includes police, fire, public works, as well as park, recreation, and forestry. Your enterprise funds and special revenue, debt service, TIF funds are really project driven and will fluctuate as such. The percentages shown within this graph depict the amount of budget that each of those funds comprises. So in 2025, your general fund at $22 million comprises 30% of your total $72.9 million budget. The total requested 2025 budget is $72.9 million, which is an increase of $2.5 million or 3.5% from the 2024 adopted budget. The difference year over year is accounted for between the special revenue, debt service, TIF funds, as well as the general fund. Within that special revenue, debt service, and TIF funds, about $1.2 million increase is accounted for in tax increment financing, which is a function of TIF 711 down in Prairie Hills really experiencing increased building activity. The storm drainage fund is up almost nearly $700,000 year over year, and that's driven by projects that are contained and were adopted as part of the stormwater master plan. The general fund is up about $500,000 year over year and is really accounted for in staffing as well as operational inflation. This slide is also from last presentation and really includes highlights from the 2025 budget. I will just go over a couple of bullet points that haven't already been covered as a recap. The 2025 budget includes a balanced general fund budget of $21.9 million. The $21.9 million proposed 2025 general fund budget is a $475,000 or 2.2% increase from the 2024 adopted budget. We generally focus our presentations predominantly on the general fund because that is the city's primary operating fund. Sales tax is the city's primary revenue source, and it accounts for 47% of general fund revenue, as well as 74% of CIP revenue, as we'll cover in more detail in tonight's presentation. The 2025 budget does not include any impact from the potential passage of Initiated Measure 28, IM 28, which is currently estimated to be a $1.6 million financial loss to the city, which would be split evenly between the general fund as well as the capital improvement plan. So it would be $800,000 loss to each of those funds. The 2025 budget would also add a master mechanic and associate planner positions to the general fund. The master mechanic will expand in-house service capacity, save on external service provision expenses, and reduce the downtime of the fleet. That position would also be partially funded by the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. The associate planner would be an entry-level position in the Community Development Department and assist the department in achieving long-range planning objectives, customer service enhancements, as well as balancing the workloads of the department. The slide before you goes over some of the highlights that are included within our 2025 capital improvement plan. I would note street highlights at $3.6 million includes the annual overlay and chip seal projects. Outside agency payments total approximately $1 million to the Performing Arts Center, as well as the Brookings Health System. Those payments do drop off after 2027. In general, the capital project is a maintenance and replacement budget, which means we're prioritizing the care of our existing assets instead of generally adding new. The exception to that, and a primary addition of the capital improvement project or capital improvement plan, would be the addition of an inclusive playground near the Branch Creek development at the Fishback Soccer Complex. And that would be funded through a combination of city funds, which is represented by the $900,000, as well as grants and private donations. We are proposing a skate park renovation, which has been in our capital improvement plan for a number of years at $315,000. And this would update aging equipment at the complex located near the Brookings High School and Bob Sheldon Field. We also have a number of larger scale vehicle and equipment replacements coming up to include vehicles within the police department, fire engine 3 replacement, as well as a motor grader and street sweeper within the Public Works Department. The slide before you gives an executive overview and a 10-year look at our capital improvement plan in its entirety. As I previously mentioned, you may notice that our outside agency payments to the Performing Arts Center, as well as the Brookings Health System, do drop off after 2027. We are showing a transfer of sales tax to the general fund from the capital improvement plan to account for the revenue that's coming in from the BMU water treatment plant. So we're transferring that money over to the general fund to make the general fund whole, as we're temporarily reducing our transfer from BMU as they're paying sales tax as part of that water treatment plant project. I would also draw attention to the note that our debt service currently obligated by the city would fall off after 2033. The debt to revenue ratio per city council policy is at 33%. So as you'll notice in this line here, city council and the city is well within that policy that's comprised there. Within the 10-year window itself, would draw attention to that we are showing an overall balanced budget, which shows that it is structurally sustainable. We are projecting a sales tax increase of 2.2% year over year, which is the same number that we're utilizing within our general fund or first penny sales tax as well. And then we increase that to a modest 2.5% year over year as we go out. I would also draw attention to, we do have some special revenue funds that are recognized in here in 2027, 2030, and 2031. Those are state transportation funds that would be utilized for future improvements to 22nd Avenue as we look at the upcoming phases. As you go down our additional revenue sources for 2025, we anticipate bringing in about $300,000 in interest income. We do budget that revenue source 1 year at a time to make sure that we're aligning it closely with the market as possible. We have experienced higher than usual rates of return. We don't necessarily expect that to continue with the rate cuts that are going on, so we anticipate that we would have less than $300,000 coming in the future. We are showing a transfer in project contribution of about $109,000. This transfer in would be coming in from the solid waste and the storm drainage funds, and this would help cover a portion of the office suite remodel project that's planned in community development engineering suite. This would locate more of the public works staff within the city county administration building. We are showing a transfer in starting in 25 and continuing on from tax increment financing revenues. That TIF revenue is repaying CIP fund for financing infrastructure costs in advance for a digester to support Bell Brands, as well as development infrastructure in Prairie Hills and Timberline housing developments. The contributed capital within the 2025 budget would be the amount of carryover that we would propose to use to balance this fund. As you can see going forward, we in future years we do have this carry forward amount. Essentially, that is our surplus reserve that we're utilizing to balance the CIP fund. And then starting in 2030, we're proposing to add any surplus funds into the City Council Priority Project Fund to help offset any larger initiatives of the council or community. We want to make sure that we have all of our needs met within the capital improvement plan before doing so. So city staff will be doing an additional, more detailed review of the capital improvement plan just to make sure that there are no needs that are not being met by the plan before we transfer those funds out. But as of right now, we are showing essentially a surplus starting in 2030 that would be able to serve as a second pot of money to supplement the City Council Financial Policy Projects Fund. This slide here provides a more detailed breakdown of where our 2025 capital improvement revenue is coming in. As members of council and public likely know, the city receives 2% sales tax. The first percent goes to the general fund to support our operations. The second percent comes into the capital improvement plan to fund those one-time purchases over $25,000. And as previously mentioned, that second penny sales tax does account for 74% of capital improvement plan revenues. The contributed capital shows the amount of surplus or reserves that would be utilized in 2025 to balance the capital improvement plan. We do have that $300,000 of interest income coming in, as well as about $1 million in TIF revenue that's repaying the CIP for previously fronted funds, and then $109,000 coming in to help offset the cost of the suite remodel and community development and engineering. Mr. Mayor, I believe Councilmember Specker may have a question.
Yeah, just a quick question while you're on this. On the TIF revenue, is that just existing TIFs?
That is correct. This is TIF revenue specifically from TIFs number 6, number 7, and number 8. As mentioned, the CIP in the past had paid for infrastructure improvements within those TIFs, and then as time has gone on and development has occurred, we are now able to essentially pay ourselves back from that TIF revenue that's coming in.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide shows a breakdown of our 2025 CIP expenditures by a couple of different categories. About over $1 million, or about 7% of those expenditures, are going to outside agencies. We do have bond payments in the amount of $1.5 million, or 11%, and that is going to help pay down improvements that were made for the Bob Sheldon field renovations, as well as the Larson Ice Arena. We do have about $9.9 million, or 72%, in capital projects that we will detail out in the coming slides. And then we do have transfers out of about 1.3 million, and those go to fund improvements at the Dakota Bank Center, the Edgebrook Golf Course, the airport improvements, as well as our contribution to the Public Art Fund, which will also be covered in more detail. As we look at our expenditures in the upcoming year, Public Works and Parks, Recreation, and Forestry account for over 70% of our 2025 expenditures at a little over $9 million. Public Works expenses are driven by street maintenance and equipment replacement. Parks, Recreation, and Forestry expenses are driven by the Inclusive Park Project, the skate park renovation, and Larson Ice Center HVAC control system updates. Public safety expenses are driven by vehicle replacements, which are based on useful life schedules. And then our other projects, which compromises a very small amount, are primarily building as well as some IT projects, which we'll also cover. The slide before you shows a further breakdown of those public works projects that are proposed for 2025. We've got the street maintenance, which includes overlay and chip seal projects included there. We do note the remodeling of the Public Works office, which again, about $110,000 of that will be offset through the solid waste and storm drainage funds. The airport does show about $95,000 in expenses, which would be for updates to the terminal, as well as the city's portion of any potential grant for snow removal equipment. And as noted, we do have various vehicles and pieces of equipment within Public Works that are at the end of their useful life and up for replacement. Parks, Recreation, Capital Project, or Parks and Recreation budget. As noted, largest expenditure is for the inclusive playground at the Branch Creek addition, as well as our Fishback Soccer Complex, and that is funded by a combination of city funds, grants, and donations, replacing the skate park equipment as mentioned. The HVAC controls at the Larson Ice Center, that is a project that is guided by our 10-year facility analysis assessment, showing that those are at the end of their useful life. We also have a forestry dump truck and a fleet pickup truck that are scheduled for replacement in the upcoming year. Library has a $100,000 budget to replace some bathroom or upgrade the bathrooms that have become outdated within the facility, and then $50,000 for adding key card access to certain portions of the facility, installing permanent plexiglass up front for safety measures, and then some smaller scale furniture replacement. There are funds made available, as you'll see, at $250,000 to fund the Bike Master Plan continued implementation, as well as trail maintenance within the system generally, and then as well as a portion specifically to the Dakota Nature Park. At the Dakota Bank Center.
Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. Jake, I had a question about the implementation of the Bicycle Master Plan. That plan, of course, is several years old now, but I think still provides a really nice guide map. I know that we're re-engaging the Bicycle Advisory Committee, I think under Parks and Recreation. Will they be involved in the implementation of that plan and how we prioritize projects? I think they were a major part of the development of the plan, so I'm curious if that's the purpose, or if that's part of the purpose in bringing them back, and what role they'll play in helping us create priorities.
Councilmember Wendell, that's a great question. I could certainly give a very high-level generic answer, but we do have our Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director here. So I'd invite Kristen to step forward and go ahead and speak to that in more detail than I could.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Yes, that's the purpose of the Bicycle Subcommittee, to re-engage. The purpose of it, re-engaging them, is to really drive those capital improvements and outreach and education along with legislative support.
That's great. Thank you.
All right, Dakota Bank Center, we are budgeting about $670,000 improvements in 2025. A larger project that may be a little bit out of the norm is we are budgeting close to $300,000 for restroom improvements in that facility. Again, that facility is approaching about 20 years old, so there are starting to be some larger scale maintenance and update needs that are needed, or update improvements that are needed. On a bit of good news, in 2025, we have our last year of payments for the retractable risers. That is a $131,000 lease, essentially, from the landfill. So after 2025, we will see that $130,000 payment drop off, and those retractable risers will be fully paid for. Golf course at $278,000 is comprised of replacing equipment and mowers, and then continuing to add additional cart path to the facility as well. And as mentioned, the public art, about $99,000, $100,000, covered in more detail in the first presentation, but again, this is contribution that's generated by a formula, 1% of eligible capital expenditures. 2025 public safety improvements, really driven by equipment and vehicles, primarily vehicles. As you'll note on this presentation, a number of those fire department or fire apparatus replacements are noted as a lease. We typically set those leases to be 5 years in duration. We have historically utilized the solid waste fund to pay for those, and then we would repay that back from the capital improvement plan. We would charge a 3% interest rate internally that the CIP would pay back that solid waste fund. The Engine 1 lease noted up there expires next year in 2025. The Rescue 1 lease would expire in 2028, and the Engine 3 lease would expire in 2029. Some of our smaller other expenditures, we would expend the remaining funds for the Amoresco project. That is also known as our energy efficiency project. It's about $3.5 million that City Council had approved previously via budget amendment. We anticipate the vast majority of those funds being expended in 2024. Their payment schedule does have a small payout anticipated for 2025. We would continue to fund our sinking fund contribution. The sinking fund is really utilized to mitigate against large unexpected repairs for vehicles, facilities, so on and so forth. The City Council financial policy sets the cap at the sinking fund at $1 million. Ash and I had just talked about this, and we're currently around $800,000 to $900,000. So we've actually been funding the sinking fund at a faster rate than we've been expending those funds, which is great. So in 2025, we may not need to make our full contribution to the sinking fund, depending on utilization. A couple of expenses from the IT division. The PD portion is part of the Axon body camera subscription fee, as well as replacing squad car computers. And then Nutanix is a current service that we utilize. This would be a slight expansion of that and really utilized to promote business continuity by enhancing disaster recovery, whether that be natural or man-made. As mentioned in the top of the presentation, we do have a $150,000 transfer from the general fund, or from the CIP to the general fund, and this would be to make the general fund whole as part of the BMU water treatment plant project. And then within this building here, we do have about $30,000 of continual IT upgrades that we budget. The city does pay 48% of that. The county does pay 52%. So this would just show the city's contribution to the IT improvements for this building at $14,400.
Councilmember Duren.
Thank you, Mayor. Clarifying question for the IT police department. Did you say that that was body cameras themselves or the software?
Ooh, that's a good question. I know it's the IT portion of the body camera subscription.
Okay. I just wanted a clarification because then on the previous slide you had also listed body cameras under police department. So I just wanted a clarification between the two.
Yes, so this part here would actually be the purchase of the physical body cameras themselves. This would be more for the software services portion.
Sure. Thank you.
A look ahead within the 10-year window. As mentioned at the top of the presentation, we do have our debt service payments ending after 2033. We do have a large fire apparatus replacement of the platform truck in 2026. That's a $1.7 million expense that we would anticipate doing under that 5-year lease as mentioned. The next phase of the 22nd Avenue reconstruction would be in 2027, and that would be from A Street South to 12th Street South. We would look at the next phase of 22nd Avenue in 2031, and that would be from 12th Street South to 20th Street South. And also within the CIP, we do have golf course irrigation system replacement budgeted in 2030 for $2 million. This slide just really is meant to show that we do have some larger expenses within the 10-year window and exactly where those would fall. As we look to conclude the presentation, I would just reiterate that over the course of the 10-year window, the CIP is balanced and is structurally sustainable. Staff will be completing another round of analysis to ensure that long-term needs are accounted for, specifically in 2030 to 2034. Just ensure that all of those needs are met as we look to replace equipment. Really, the city is in a great position with that debt expiring starting in 2034. And ultimately, if these funds are available, shown here in teal, the priority projects funds, we can see that we're contributing there as opposed to carrying those funds over. That is a dedicated staff exercise because we do know within the City Council financial policy projects, we do have a public safety facility that we're searching to fund, a fire station that would be relocated. We completed analysis on the potential to renovate the activity center as well as the public library. And then there are additional funds that have been, or additional projects that have been identified by staff that are currently not in here, and these would be really additions to, as opposed to our general philosophy, which is caring for the existing equipment and facilities that we have today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Finance Director, Ashley Wrench, to cover the consolidated fee schedule.
The consolidated fee schedule includes general departmental fees, fines and violations administered by the police department, and the Edgebrook Golf Course rates. Departments review fees semi-annually and as needed to accomplish the departmental objectives of comparability with peer communities, staying current with market trends, and cost recovery for providing programs and services. In 2025, the Solid Waste Division will continue following the Solid Waste Master Plan with approximately 3% rate increases, bringing the monthly residential rate up 55 cents to $19.10, and the additional cart fee up 20 cents to $6.20 per month. Similarly, prices will go up approximately 3% for all landfill costs, which equates to approximately 25 cents to $1.65 for materials. Mobile homes will see an increase of $7.75, and tire disposal will also go up by 5% to 6.5%, or 15 cents to $1.85, depending on the type of tire, with the exception of rubber tracks, which will see a $13 per ton increase. The airport's fuel flowage fee will go up for the fixed base operator by 2 cents per gallon, and all others will see an increase of 3 cents per gallon. The hangar application fee is increasing by $100 to $150 to account for the administrative costs of processing those applications, and the gate cards will go up by $5 to $25. Overall, for Public Works, the labor and equipment rates will be updated to reflect the average burden rate by position and the current FEMA schedule for equipment. In community development, the tax increment financing application fee, which was previously $1,000, is now set at $10,000 to align with the city's tax increment financing guidelines, and sign fees will go up by $5 across the board. Single-family building permits will go up by $5 to $10 per square foot, depending on the type of permit. And finally, the library will increase the out-of-county library card fees by $5 and add a meeting room reservation fee as well as their fees for printing and copies to the fee schedule. The fee schedule adoption resolution will be brought to the council in conjunction with the second reading of the budget ordinance at the first meeting in November, and other fee updates will likely be included between now and then. Any material changes to that will be noted in the final resolution presentation. With that, that concludes our presentation, and we will stand by for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions, comments? All right, very well done. Thank you. Item 5, open forum. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council on an item not listed on tonight's agenda?
Hi, Cara Bianchi-Rossi. I think you all know me by now. I am here tonight about a separate issue that we have been here before, and this is an immediate concern about 312 8th Avenue and a known code violation that is going on of a landlord renting a home to a single-family house to 7 people. The city council members talked with Attorney Breitzman, Mayor Niemeyer, and City Manager Brazino 2 weeks ago about enforcing the penalties for that violation, yet nothing has been done. We are questioning why nothing has been done. This is not okay. Are we picking and choosing what landlords we are going to enforce this code to? We want to know as citizens why we are not enforcing this zoning violation. Several of us have been here talking about this. We know there's an ordinance going to happen tonight that you were going to pass. We all know that. That has nothing to do with the zoning violation that is happening at the moment. We ask that the City Council direct the City Attorney and take action today, like you asked them to do 2 weeks ago. And still, nothing has been done.
Reed, do you want to make a comment?
This is about something separate. Just announcement to the community to come to our Coffee with Council this Friday on September 27th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Starbucks. I just also want to thank everyone for coming to our summer sessions at the Farmers Market and Brookings Bonanza in downtown at sundown. So we are excited to see you at Starbucks on Friday.
All right. Any other comments, public forum?
Hi, I'm Molly Richter, and I want to talk about the same thing as Kara. It's not on the agenda, and we're separating the two issues. There's a zoning violation issue, and there's an ordinance. This is not about the ordinance. That's a different story. This is just about the fact that city leaders have been aware of a blatant zoning violation since April or May of this year and have failed to enforce the zoning laws. The last city council meeting gave us a lot of hope that the rental zoning laws would be enforced, and Councilmember Wendell specifically asked if the two issues could be separated and if the rental zoning could be enforced. Mr. Breitzman, Mr. Pisano, and Mr. Neymar all kind of shook heads and agreed that it probably could be separated, and I think many other council members spoke about the benefit of looking at them as two separate items. We've now had 2 weeks, and nothing was done to rectify the zoning violation. Instead, City Attorney Breitzman informed our attorney that there was no intention to enforce the zoning at this time. A resident asked the council 2 weeks ago if the building owner obtained a rental license. The answer was either that he didn't have one yet or the status was unknown. The Code of Ordinances of the City of Brookings includes Article 6, rental dwelling units, which clearly notes requirements for an owner to legally lease their building as a rental unit. I won't read the various sections, but it limits the number of people. And there's a section that clearly provides the steps to take when the city is aware of a code violation. And Chapter 1 details the penalty process. To our knowledge, this building owner has not even received the $200 fine that's listed in there. So I ask the leaders of the city, where in the code ordinances does it state that you have the right to choose which violations to penalize? I spent a lot of time reading the city code. I can't find any allowances for picking and choosing which landlords are exempt from requirements of a rental license, which are exempt from the maximum number of tenants, or which landlords should be allowed to get away with blatantly leasing their home to a business in direct violation of our zoning without so much as a fine over a 5 or 6 month period. Ordinances exist to protect our city and its residents, but they have no value when they're selectively chosen to be ignored. I would end by stating the city has had 2 weeks since the last meeting to review these articles and proceed with enforcing the code, but that would be misleading. The city's actually had more than 5 months to do so. Residents are aware of this inaction. Various landlords are as well. And we ask once again, you take action now. What is the point of having ordinances if you're not going to enforce them? The residents want action now. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, go on to consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda? Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on any item on the consent agenda? Council have any questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Okay, presentation and reports. Report from SDSU Student Association. Claire Kennecke.
Good evening, everyone. I've got a few things tonight. Last time I was here, I touched on the work Students Association had been doing with Beta in regards to the $2 rides for students if they book online through the app. President Peterson has received a little data from schools similar to SDSU's size in regards to what they do in tackling transportation across their campuses. It looks like as of right now, we're going to keep pursuing the partnership with Beta in developing a better app, and we're excited that not only students but also community members can be able to use this going forward. We will keep working on that, I think, the rest of this term. The next thing is that yesterday Students Association released a survey for students. Last year we completed the General Activity Fee, or GAF, strategic plan. So we set up for how GAF is going to be spent from 2024 to 2030. In this work, we found that a bond on the student union from the last time they expanded is going to be up after this academic year. And so what we kind of did is we tried to reallocate that bond. It's about $2.58 to different areas, mainly prioritizing student organizations and also mental health. But we have to get approval from the Board of Regents to do this, and so our survey is hopefully gathering data in support of keeping the GAF fee flat. So if this passes, GAF would stay flat at $50.85 a credit hour. If the board doesn't approve it, it'll likely go down $2, but we're hoping that it goes through so that we can prioritize student orgs and mental health. So we're excited about that. We're looking for about 3,000 survey results. Last time we checked, we have about 1,000. So in 2 days, we're pretty happy with that progress. The next thing is the Board of Regents is meeting on campus next week. Next Wednesday and Thursday, they will be in town for their fall meetings. So we're excited to show them around and show them all the great work that students have been doing on campus. And we're excited to be able to see them face to face and pop in for a few meetings. And then the last thing I have is that Hobo Week, we're gearing up for Hobo Week. Hobo Day is on October 12th this year. And so Hobo Week starts Monday, October 7th. And there's lots of ways that the community can get involved, and so we hope to see you all there. And I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions, comments? All right, thank you. Okay, presentation, 6 Mile Creek feasibility study. Charlie Richter, our city engineer, will present this item.
Good evening, Council. As you already know, I'm Charlie Richter, your city engineer, and I'm here to present the 6 Mile Creek feasibility study. In 2021, the city was awarded a FEMA hazard mitigation grant to study flooding along 6 Mile Creek. To assist the city with this project, the city hired Respect Engineering from Rapid City. Their extensive knowledge from modeling the Big Sioux River made them a good partner for the project. The scope of work included survey of various hydraulic structures along the 6 Mile Creek, review and revision of FEMA's preliminary hydraulic modeling, development of mitigation alternatives, development of high-level cost-benefit analysis for the options to assist in future grant applications, public outreach, and the exploration of possible FEMA grant options. To achieve these objectives, the consultant collected and analyzed data from a variety of sources, including previous studies, historical data, including photos of past flooding, public meetings, FEMA floodplain modeling, meetings with FEMA, flow gauge monitoring, and property owner meetings. I will take the next several minutes to go over the main points of the plan. Some of these slides from past public engagement, so I will quickly revisit them. As I stated earlier, the main purpose of the project was to develop flood mitigation concepts along with a benefit cost analysis that could be used for future grant funding. Benefit cost analysis is a ratio of savings and damages versus project cost. The higher the ratio, the more favorable FEMA will look at these projects for future funding. The main area of focus was the trapezoidal area shown in the slide above, with the northern extent bounded by the 14 bypass, the eastern extent bounded by Medaria Avenue, the western extent bounded by the 14 diagonal, and the southern extent bounded by 6th Street. This area of focus impacts approximately 230 structures valued at millions of dollars. This report came with 5 primary flood mitigation concepts that were analyzed, including channel connectivity in red, lengthening of diagonal bridges as shown in the yellow, levees, which is shown in the green above, channel bypass, which is in purple, and upstream detention, which is shown in the dark blue. Concept 1 is the lengthening of the Highway 14 bridges to allow more water to pass downstream, as this is a bottleneck in the northern branch of the creek. Before the both the northern and southern bridges were analyzed, with the northern bridge showing the most promise. The proposed bridge would go from 100 to 500 feet. This option showed a benefit-cost ratio between 0.62 to 0.93. When looking for FEMA grants, these ratios, while not strong, is still within FEMA's acceptable range. Concept 2 is a combination of channel connectivity and widening of the Highway 14 bridge. Channel connectivity has been long talked about in the city, reestablishing the northern branch of the creek to provide a more balanced split between the two branches. While this would redirect water from the southern portion to the northern portion of the creek, it would have a negative impact for properties downstream on the northern portion of the creek. Respect analyzed this project with widening the diagonal bridge to provide relief for the additional water projected toward the northern channel. Probable cost for this project is between $21 and $23 million, with a cost-benefit ratio between 0.48 and 0.71. Downstream impacts would be one of the greater obstacles to overcome with this option. Concept 3 is channel bypass option that has been talked about for many years. This involves routing the creek completely around the city as shown in the blue line above. Option of probable cost is between $38 and $40 million, with a cost-benefit ratio of 0.58 and 0.77. This would require 2 to 3 new bridges, wetland mitigation, property acquisition, and managing downstream impacts. Concept 4 is upstream detention that would be located in the blue area above. This would act as a dry dam. During heavy rain events, the basin would fill and then slowly release water downstream, similar to detention basins we see around the city. Opinion of probable cost is between $18 and $20 million, but has a high benefit cost ratio between 1.11 and 1.49, which would be very favorable in FEMA's eyes. Concerns include its classification as a high hazard dam, property acquisition, its possible impact to the well fields that it would be situated on, future maintenance, and wetland mitigation. Concept 5 is a levee system along both branches of the creek in the trapezoidal area, and shown by the dashed lines in the slide above. This would protect homes on both sides of the creek at a cost of $43 to $45 million. This levee system would have a benefit cost ratio between 0.49 and 0.66. Concerns include levee classification, land acquisition, drainage from properties along the levee system, and the complexity. As you will see, a summary of the 5 concepts with their probable cost and the cost-benefit ratios for each project is shown above. Staff focus moving forward will be the refinement of mitigation options with the help of FEMA technical assistance. This could include one of the options or a hybrid of two or more of the options that we have just gone over. FEMA, moving forward, will look at a phased grant from FEMA to further development and refinement of those options, as well as design. Development of, and then staff will be also looking at development of maintenance strategy for portions of the creek bordered by city-owned property. The area west of the Western Ave Bridge is being targeted for debris removal, possibly this fall, with a possible larger project in the future. Recently, we have been asked about performing maintenance along the creek We are currently working with Respect to develop a strategy for performing long-term maintenance along the city-owned portions, including navigating Army Corps permitting. Man-made portions of the creek are easier to permit with Army Corps and more manageable from a city perspective. We are looking at doing some debris removal for the portion by the Western Avenue Bridge this fall, and then maybe a longer-term project in the future. One other question that has been brought up by the public in the past is opening up the channel, the northern branch of the 6 Mile Creek. This has been looked at by Respect. As we talked about earlier on, this would need to be coupled with relief for that area that is between the bypass and the diagonal for that northern portion of the creek, for properties along that northern portion of the creek, and would have to be coupled with possibly a bridge lengthening to relieve the bottleneck there. I also like to point out the final study has now been posted on the city's website and can be found at the engineering portion of the web.
Thank you, Charlie. Open it up for public comments, questions? Questions, comments from council? Councilmember Specker.
Yeah, Charlie, do you have any idea of the timeline for deciding which one and submitting something to FEMA?
As you can see, these solutions are pretty extensive, both in cost and magnitude. And we are working with FEMA right now with their technical assistance portion to navigate that. It's not every day that communities tackle projects such as this. So we're looking for FEMA assistance with this project to narrow and refine the options, and then looking at maybe a phased approach for further refinement. We don't take these options very lightly. There's obstacles with each one of them that we need to navigate, and we'll have to carefully navigate that so that everyone's interest is realized.
Can I
Go ahead.
You had also mentioned the wellheads, and I was just wondering, since Eric's here, if maybe he could mention or talk about whether or not that might be a problem with the retention option on this?
Well, it's been discussed with BMU and as well as with Eric. While he's not been completely opposed to the idea, that would have to be examined to see what possible impact that may have on the wellheads on the surface. And I won't speak for Eric, but on the surface, adding additional groundwater for water that already passes through the well fields and detaining it is not necessarily a problem, but I would defer to Eric to talk about what possible contamination may occur and threaten risk.
Thanks.
I was going to say, Eric, you're more than welcome to come up and make comments.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if that was my official cue or not. Eric Witt, Water Wastewater Manager at VMU. Yes, I've talked about the potential detention scenario with Charlie, and it is over our wellhead protection area. My understanding is that as a dry dam, it's not retaining the water there permanently. It would just increase the depth of the flood event and then meter itself back out. So that's an area that definitely floods already. So I have that circumstance with a flood event now. So there's been times that there's been 4 feet of water over that whole area, let's say. If we do a dry dam and it retains more to protect the downstream creek channel through town, maybe it goes up to 6 feet. I don't know what the incremental difference in risk to the wellhead is for that additional volume of water that's retained there. But as that event goes through, just like any other flood event, it will drain back out and just function like a normal creek. So I think there's certainly evaluation required there and our due diligence. But I've got a version of that circumstance occurring now. So not opposed, but would want to look into that question in more detail. Yep.
Any other comments, questions from council? Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on the grants. I saw that one is noted as competitive. I was wondering if they both are like of similar ranges and top priority to try to attain, or if we're going for the BRIC grant first, and then depending on how that pans out, if the FMA grant would be supplemental, or kind of what the strategy is behind applying for the grants.
Yeah, there's two grants that we would be looking at, would be the hazard mitigation grant and a BRIC grant. And the BRIC grant is a more competitive grant, but at the same time, the state provides a contribution as well as part of that. So normally the hazard mitigation grant is about 75-25 split. BRIC grant, I believe, from my discussions with the state, they would contribute another 5 to 10%. So it'd be more in that 80 to 85% participation rate. But we would have to navigate that and see which one would be more attainable.
Sure, thank you.
All right. I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, on to item 8A, action on resolution 24-089, a resolution awarding bids to the 2024 Brookings Trails project. Kristen Zimmerman, our Park and Rec Director, will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. The resolution 24-09 is the bid to award 3 trails projects, 2 new construction, 1 maintenance projects to Timmons Construction in the amount of $164,084.23. And we have some pictures of the trails. The first one is around Sexauer Park. It's to connect Western Avenue to 11th Street, allow for a lot of those rental homes, have bike access over to the university, keeping people off of 6th Street on their bike. The path will run north of the dog park in through Sexauer Park. The next project is an accessible route from Pioneer Park, from the bathrooms to the shelter, to connect those with an accessible route. We've worked with our main user groups out there, and it shouldn't impact any large-scale events that are there annually. And then the last one is just our annual trail replacement at the Dakota Nature Park. They're focused around the dock areas and fishing piers. These are complete trail replacements. They're getting a little worn and seeing a lot of cracking. I will say the Timmons Construction came in under the engineer's estimated cost just by a little, and the other 2 exceeded it significantly. So I stand for any questions.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Comments, council? Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen, given that the bid came in below what our estimate was, were there any alternates as part of the project that could be considered?
Yeah, it was just slightly under budget by $20,000. So we'll do some more kiosks throughout the community. So there'll be more mapping and those smaller scale projects and repair that don't necessarily have to go out for bid. But we'll use the money.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Comments? Please call the roll.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Okay. Item 8B, action resolution on 24-087, a resolution awarding bids on project 2025-09 STI concrete maintenance project. Charlie Richter, our city engineer, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council again. I'm here requesting approval for Resolution 24-087 for the bid award for the 2025-09 STI concrete maintenance project. This annual concrete project includes removal and replacement of non-compliant ramps throughout the city, curb replacement, fillets, and other concrete items throughout the city. Majority of these repairs will help prepare streets for pavement restoration in 2025. We find that if we get ahead of the pavers with our concrete work, we are able to minimize downtime for streets. A bid letting for this project was held on Tuesday, September 17th. There were 3 bidders. Timmons Construction, Inc. came in as the lowest bidder at $298,549.50, which is approximately 2% lower than the engineer's estimate. Public Works has funds within the CIP fund to fund this project, and we recommend approval of the award.
Thank you, Charlie. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Move.
Been moved and seconded on this item. Is there any public comment on this item? Council have questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Item 8C, action on resolution 24-088, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 for 2024-09 STI concrete maintenance project, Timmons Construction Incorporated. Charlie will present this item also.
Public Works is looking for approval of Resolution 24-088, change order number 1 for project 2024-09 STI concrete maintenance project. This concrete maintenance project included sidewalk trip hazard repairs and included various other concrete items for paving streets that we utilize them for paving streets this past year. We are looking for an increase in the amount of $22,914.50, which is a 7% increase in the final contract amount for Timmons Construction. We found that, oddly enough, a lot of residents, when we were doing trip hazard repairs, requested additional sidewalk to be repaired in addition to what we were doing. So we worked with the residents to do this additional work to help them through with some of their concerns in their sidewalk in front of their house. So, and this also included a lot of curb repairs throughout the city. The city has funding within the CIP fund to fund this additional work, and Public Works recommends approval of the change order.
Thank you, Charlie. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded on this project. Is there any public comment on this item? Council questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Item 8D, action on resolution 24-086, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 for 2024-06 STI chip seal project, Bitumus Paving Incorporated. Charlie will present this item also.
Public Works is requesting approval of Resolution 24086, which is the change order number 1 for project 2024-06 STI, the annual chip seal project. As you may have seen throughout the city, we have changed our process in the chip seal process by minimizing the amount of time between chip seal and the sweeping of the chips, as well as including a fog seal on the chip seal to prevent dust kick-up and to improve adhesion of the chips to the surface. We found that this has been very effective and provides a nice aesthetic appeal. We have, and during the process and during the project, we included an additional street to the list for the contractor. 5th Street South between Madera Avenue and 17th Avenue was added to the list, which is the reason why we're in front of you tonight for a change order in the amount of $22,631.30, which equates to a 4% increase to the overall project. Public Works there's funding within the CIP fund for this additional work, and Public Works recommends approval.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council have questions, comments? On this project, was it originally under budget to begin with? Do we recall?
I don't recall, Mr. Mayor. I believe it was.
So we might have been breaking even on what we had already intended for our budget, or close?
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye. Okay, on to first readings. Item 9A, introduction and first reading on ordinance 24-016, an ordinance amending Division 3, speed and related offenses, Section 82-305, speed zones. John Thompson, our Public Recs Director, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. John Thompson with Public Works. Item 9A is the introduction and first reading of ordinance 24-016. The proposed ordinance will amend Division 3, speed and related offenses, sections 82-305, speed zones. This amendment is needed as the city has recently accepted the I-29 exit 30 interchange, which extends the 35-mile-an-hour speed zone along 20th Street to the eastern city limit boundary. In addition, this amendment removes all references to U.S. Highway 14, as U.S. Highway 14 is regulated by state statutes, negating the need to include those speed zones within our city ordinance. A redlined and clean copy of the ordinance is included in your package. The second reading of this ordinance will be presented to City Council on Tuesday, October 8th, and that concludes staff's presentation. And stand for any questions.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council have any questions, comments? All right. On to item 9B, introduction and first reading on ordinance 24-032, an ordinance to rezone Lot 2 in Block 3B of Prairie Hills Addition from a planned development district with business B2A office district underlying zoning to a planned development district with business B2 district underlying zoning. Ryan Miller, our city planner, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Item 9B is an introduction and first reading of ordinance 2432, an ordinance to rezone Lot 2 and Block 3B of Prairie Hills Addition from a planned development district with business B2A office district underlying zoning to planned development district with business B2 district underlying zoning. Lot 2 and Block 3B of Prairie Hills Addition is located at the corner of 20th Street South and Tallgrass Parkway at the southeast corner. In the area outlined in blue. The developer of the property proposed a site plan to the Planning Commission for a final development plan earlier in the summer, and they were proposing a drive-through component of that site plan. If you recall, earlier in the year, we passed an ordinance to prohibit drive-throughs in the B2A office district. The developer would like to retain the proposal for the drive-through and is seeking the business B2 district, which would allow the drive-through. This is the introduction and first reading. The second reading and public hearing would be October 8th. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions from the public? Comments? Council have any questions, comments? Council member Specker.
Ryan, when the Planning Commission in their minutes on this, there was some discussion about if they actually have a drive-through that it has to come back. I wasn't quite sure what that discussion was about. I was wondering if you could just summarize what the concern was.
Sure. So the Planning Commission did approve the final development plan eliminating the drive-through. So if the rezoning were to pass, the developer would have to come back to the Planning Commission with a revised final development plan, and then the Planning Commission could then discuss approving that drive-through lane. But as it is now, regardless of the rezone, the drive-through was denied by the Planning Commission with that action on the final development plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from council? Okay. Item 9C, introduction and first reading on ordinance 24-033, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2 pertaining to Section 94-165, Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District. Ryan will present this item also.
Mayor and City Council, item 9C is the introduction and first reading of ordinance 2433, amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2, pertaining to Section 94-165, Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District. The Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District was established in 2021, so just about 3 years ago, and we have seen a number of projects along all 4 of our commercial corridors, 6th Street, Main Avenue, 22nd Avenue, and 20th Street come through in that time. Since the development of the Commercial Corridor District, we have received some feedback from the Planning Commission, Development Community, about whether there would be an opportunity to look at administrative approval for projects in the corridor district that meet all of the regulations established in that overlay district. Currently, the only process for site plan reviews in the overlay district is to go through Planning Commission and City Council reviews of the site plan, regardless of whether they meet all the regulations or are seeking exceptions to the regulations. So staff has looked through our ordinance and proposed a few changes to the overlay district. The main goal behind the changes were to offer an administrative review component to the commercial corridor design review if they meet all the standards. And there was a few revisions made in there to try to better understand, what all the regulations are, remove some subjectivity in the code. And so that's what will be proposed is any exceptions that are sought from the commercial corridor would still have to go through Planning Commission and City Council. But if they do meet all the regulations, it'd be an administrative review and save the developers some time. So this is the introduction and first reading. The second reading and hearing would be on October 8th. And I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thanks. Any other comments, questions from the public? Council, have any questions, comments? Councilmember Wendell.
I just have a comment to make. Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a good example of gathering feedback from the development community and sort of implementing it to better our process and expedite some of our processes. I know the commercial corridor review process has been a learning process for all of us, and as a council, we've been along the ride for that process. So I think if there's a way to expedite the process for developers that are not necessarily requesting any variance, that makes good sense. And if this came as a recommendation between staff, commission members, and developers, then I'm supportive.
Thank you. Councilmember Tilton-Burn.
My question is just a clarifying element, and that's to say that this would simply make the design review an administrative process, correct? All other elements such as zoning and site planning would still remain the same and still go through planning and zoning and city council review, correct?
Councilmember Tilton-Burn, this would be just for the commercial corridor site plan component. So if there are rezones or plats or conditional uses, anything else, those would still go through the standard review processes through Planning Commission, City Council. It's just the site plan for areas in there. If they meet all the standards, they would go through administrative review.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 9D, introduction and first reading on ordinance 24-034, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Article 6, Division 3, pertaining to Section 94-395, projections of porches, decks, platforms, and cantilevered floors. Ryan will present this item also.
Mayor and City Council, this is the introduction and first reading of Ordinance 2434, amendments to Chapter 94, Article 6, Division 3, pertaining to porches, decks, and platforms within required yard areas. Staff is proposing some changes to the allowance for projections of porches, decks, and platforms into required yard areas, including front yard, side yard, and rear yard. There have been a number of variances applied for and approved of by the Board of Adjustment, over the last few years, mostly related to front decks, seeking to get a little further out from the homes. Previously, we allowed only like a ratio of the allowed setback, or the required setback. Staff is proposing to allow decks to encroach the front yard setback by 10 feet, but no closer than 10 feet at the sidewalk. Side yards would be similar. We would allow a projection into the side yard setback, the side yard setback for 4 feet for attached decks. Detached decks would not be allowed to encroach in the side yard. Rear yards would be allowed to encroach 20% in the setback. Detached porches would not be allowed to project into the setback area. There was a provision also for balconies on second floors and above that would be allowed to project 6 feet into the setback area. We saw a couple of cases this summer of larger apartment projects that were seeking balconies to project into the yard area. And then the last item was to provide an allowance for stairs and ramps leading to decks and porches to exceed the allowable projections discussed in 1 through 4. The second reading and public hearing on this item would be October 8th, and I would stand for any questions.
All right. Public comment on this item. Questions? Council, any questions, comments? Planning Commission has been busy.
Yes.
Reviewing a few things. It's good for them. All right, item 9A, introduction and first reading in ordinance 24-35, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2, pertaining to Section 94-163, Plan Development Districts. Ryan will present this item.
Mayor and City Council, item 9E is the first reading and introduction of ordinance 2435, amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2, pertaining to Plan Development Districts. One of the changes that is proposed in the commercial corridor design review overlay district changes is to clarify how the commercial corridor district and plan development districts interact. Previously, the commercial corridor overlay district exempted properties that were located within plan development districts. In a plan development district, they would have to go through their initial and final development plan, but would not have to do a commercial corridor site plan review. With the proposed changes to allow for the administrative review of site plans in the commercial corridor meeting all the requirements, this proposal would actually bring back the requirements of the commercial corridor district into the plan development districts, which would then hopefully allow the elimination of a final development plan when a site plan would meet all of the requirements of the commercial corridor. The goal would be to incorporate all of the commercial corridor standards at the initial development plan stage, and then once an initial development plan is approved, if the final development plan were to meet all of those commercial corridor requirements, we would exempt the FDP and save some time in the review of that proposal. This is the first reading and introduction. The second reading and public hearing will be October 8th, and I'll stand for any questions on this item.
Thanks, Ryan. Any public comment on this item or questions? Council members have any questions, comments? All right. As Ryan said, all of these items will be having a second reading on October 8th, and the action will be put on then. Second readings and public hearings. Item 10A, protest hearing and action on ordinance 24-023, an ordinance to rezone the east 151 feet of Block 1 in Northern Plains Addition from a business B2A office district to a residence R2 two-family district. You want Ryan?
Mayor and
Yeah,
Council.
Ryan presents it.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is an additional public hearing for the rezoning of the east 151 feet of Block 1 in Northern Plains Addition. It's related to Ordinance 2423, which was originally introduced in July. Second hearing was held on August 13th, at which point it was tabled, and then No, the rezone of the project was approved on August 13th. We received a protest per Section 94.7 of Municipal Code, which allows for property owners within 250 feet to formally protest the rezone. We did receive that protest and are rehearing the rezoning, which would require a 2/3 majority vote to confirm that previously approved rezone request. The area is the small red area on the south side of the residential portion of the Northern Plains project.
Thanks, Ryan. Entertain a motion to approve. So moved.
Second.
All right. I now open the protest hearing on this item. Is there any public comment?
I'm Kyle Roush with Dakota Land Design, and I'm one of the developers on this project. Most of the points I'd like to discuss tonight are tied to the updated site plan, which will be shown in the next agenda item. And so just to speak a little bit about the rezoning, we still feel like this is a good idea, and we're applying for the same thing as we'd previously applied for. We're requesting to rezone from B2A, which is appropriate for office buildings, salons, and coffee shops, and we're asking to rezone into an R2, which is the same as the adjacent property to the north. We're approved to build 20 homes right now on the adjacent R2 land, and by combining this parcel, we'll continue to plan for the same 20 homes. So we're not trying to increase our density. We'll actually be building a lower density development and provide more green space to benefit ourselves and the neighbors. We've been in communication with several of the adjacent homeowners throughout this process, especially from the first meeting to this one, and we've made great improvements to site drainage and privacy, and now many of these homeowners that are surrounding us are in support of the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions on this. Thank you.
Council, any questions, comments? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Jason Flasky, and I live at 511 Cardinal Drive Circle, and I just want to start off my my talk here by actually commending Kyle. He has been very amenable to meeting with me and some of the other neighbors, and as he said in the original and the site plan that we'll be talking about next, with that current site plan, he actually has alleviated a lot of the concerns about the flooding that was attached to that piece of land right there, and so he has been very good to work with, and but notwithstanding, we still have a problem with that little chunk of land in that you don't have 151 feet. So 151 feet takes all the way into 28 feet into the parking lot of a commercial property. This is the problem. It's difficult for a zone to be a parking lot of a commercial area of land and then call it residential. That's the main problem we have. You have 28 feet, including a street and a parking lot. And so the real rub there is, I'm not part of the zoning commission, but what I see is that there's an incongruity in that chunk of land, of that little chunk of land. And so that's a real issue that I have with it, especially if that land is intended to be used as a square foot for a building of a residential building. Yes, this is a protest order, and many of the neighbors, and it was not a small amount of them, it was well over 20, that were willing to sign on to that protest order. And so really what you have to do tonight is decide, as a council, where do your loyalties lie? With the residents who live in Brookings, who vote in Brookings, and who pay taxes in Brookings, or who have signed a protest order as prescribed by law, or do you vote in the interest of a corporation of people who don't live in this town, who don't vote in this town, yes, probably pay taxes in this town, but whose sole purpose for this property is not to better the neighborhood, not to better the adjacent properties. In the charter in 94.2, you are required to vote on zoning ordinances in order to preserve and protect the existing property uses and values. And so that's part of your charter when you're voting on this, and also to conserve the value of the property of the existing neighbors. So we're the residents, we're here first, but that's all my piece. I stand for any questions.
Council, any questions or comments? Thank you. Please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Ron Stee, 503 Deer Pass, and Mr. Roush reached out to, I guess, several neighbors now, but definitely to me, and we did an on-site walkthrough of the new proposals, and we had went through my individual concerns, and both of us understood where each other was at and how we could mitigate and address things. And with what I have seen on the new plan, I support this rezone.
Thank you. Anybody have questions, comments? Okay. Any other comments on this protest hearing? Close the protest hearing. Does council have any questions, comments? Councilmember Avery.
Well, I would just like to compliment our developer, Mr. Roush, on his efforts to mitigate the situation, or to be willing to work with the people in the neighborhood. I think it's we can all say that it was everybody wins and go home and all declare victory on this one, because we had our neighbors that really wanted to air their concerns. They were listened to. The developer took the time to listen, to work with the people in the neighborhood to make the project better and to mitigate those things. And it even is a little bit, we can say that city government maybe played a role and helped in this. So I think it's a rare case where we can all say that we came out better than when we started. So thanks to everyone concerned, including the city staff and the city council. So thank you.
Any other comments, question from Councilmember Tilton Burton?
My comment is maybe just to request a little bit of an explanation as to what a protest hearing is. I think it's really rare that we have these brought before us, and just for the sake of the public to better understand what it is we're doing here tonight, it might be helpful to share what exactly a protest hearing is.
Yes, in a nutshell, a protest hearing would be a second look at a proposed zoning change in which if the sufficient number of neighboring landowners feel that the rezoning should be reviewed again, they can petition under city ordinance to have a fresh hearing on the action. And the original rezoning action is suspended until there is a hearing as we've held tonight, and an opportunity is given for everyone to comment once again on a zoning ordinance that's already been adopted, but it's suspended if that petition is properly filed, which it was in this case. And then the additional safeguard for the public is that the voting threshold increases from a majority vote to a five members out of 7 to approve, or a 2/3 majority.
All right. Any other comments, questions from council? I concur with Councilmember Avery. Thank you very much for neighbors and the developer to come together to find a compromise. That's what we want to. That's what we want to see. So, with that being said, please call the roll.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Okay, move on to item 10B, tabled item, public hearing and action on ordinance 24-024, an ordinance to permit the conditional use permit townhouses on blocks 3A and 4 in Northern Plains Edition, City of Brookings, Brookings County, South Dakota. I entertain a motion to remove this item from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. Will Mr. Ryan Miller please present this item?
Mayor and Council, item 10B is ordinance 2424. This was an item that was introduced to the council in July. It was tabled in August and again on September 10th. This is related to the conditional use permit applied for by Northern Plains Edition on blocks 3A and 4 of Northern Plains Edition. The request is for townhomes to be located in the R2 zoning district. Townhomes require a conditional use. The developer did apply for and was granted a conditional use permit in 2022. However, that conditional use permit did expire, and they're seeking to renew that conditional use permit. This is an older version of the site plan here, which was the antithesis for asking the item to be tabled back in September. They have submitted a revised site plan that addressed a lot of the concerns that were discussed at that meeting, including adding some grass berms, moving the southernmost townhomes, the ones in green. They moved those to the north a bit to allow those trees to be retained on the south side of the townhomes and add room for, again, berms along that south and east side running up to the water retention pond on the northeast side. This revised site plan also shows the existing trees that were planted in that area just to the west of the proposed townhomes, east of the medical office. Going back to our original item back in August, this plan does come with a recommendation of approval from the Development Review Team and the Planning Commission, and I'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Ryan. The motion on the floor from the 8/13/2024 City Council meeting reads, a motion was made by Councilmember Tilton Burns, seconded by Councilmember Wendell, that ordinance 24-024, an ordinance to permit by conditional use permit townhouses on blocks 3A and 4 in Northern Plains Edition, City of Brookings, Brookings County, South Dakota, be approved. I now open the public hearing on this item. Is there any public comments?
I'm Kyle Roush with Dakota Land Design. We heard a lot of constructive comments from the neighboring homeowners at the last meeting. A lot of these comments we had not heard about previously. As we'd stated in the last meeting, we needed to finalize our site plan, and since then, and with the previous comments, we've made a lot of improvements to our project and hopefully to the neighboring homes. We've also included updated renderings showing our homes to be constructed. A little bit later down the slideshow, there should be some nice renderings of those homes. We've been in communication with several neighbors. Many of those who did reach out had requests we were able to accommodate, and we appreciate that they did reach out. And several neighbors now have expressed their support for the project. We've worked with Banner Engineering to add additional drainage considerations, including a berm and swale system as shown on our plans. This will ensure that virtually all stormwater overflow makes it to our retention pond in the northeast corner of the property and eventually off-site into the city storm drain system. Justin from Banner Engineering is here if you have any questions for him on that. Some details regarding our improved drainage plan. We're adding an emergency overflow berm near the southwest corner of the Northern Plains parking lot. That's just to make sure that any water coming off the Northern Plains building goes where it's intended and doesn't accidentally get to the neighbors to the south. We're constructing a retaining wall and berm system that will divert any water that overflows from Cloverfield Place and our parking lot there and keeps the water on our property to the greatest extent possible. That berm that runs along the property is a large berm. It'll be at least 30 inches high minimum, measured from the bottom of the swale to the top of the berm. The berm will be shorter along the trees near that south lot line, just so we can preserve those trees. But the neighbors to the south, Ron here, we've discussed with Ron, and if we need to do some trimming and increase that berm, he's understanding of that. Regarding privacy and landscaping, we plan to plant 14 new spruce trees, nice trees on the top of the berm on the east side of the property there. That berm will be fully landscaped with rock and edging, and for our benefit and for the neighbors. And our intention is to save as many of the mature trees as possible on our property to create a buffer between us and the neighbors. We have hundreds of beautiful trees, river birches, very, very nice trees there, and we want to save what we can. Any trees that don't need to be removed for the berm and swale will remain if possible. We've moved the South Townhome to the location shown, which is approximately 22 feet from the property line, so we can save those trees planted near the south lot line. And, you know, to summarize, we're approved to build 20 homes in this development, and we will likely build 20 homes, but we think that this new plan, if approved, will provide more privacy to the surrounding neighbors and have great improvements for current drainage. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Close the hearing on that. Any comments from council? Questions? Councilmember Tilton Burton?
I just want to reiterate some of the comments that were made on the last item, and that is to commend both the developer and the neighbors for working together on this. I think what we're seeing here with this berm and swale really addresses a lot of the concerns that we heard, and so I appreciate the collaboration that happened, both the willingness on the part of the developer to make these changes and also the willingness on the part of the neighbors to come forward and participate in the process. So just a really great demonstration of how this can work really well when there's communication between both parties, so thank you.
All right. Any other comments from council? Please call the roll.
Specker?
Aye.
Tildenburn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
Doran?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Rasmussen?
Aye.
Okay. Item 10C, a tabled item. Public hearing and action on ordinance 24-031, an ordinance establishing reasonable accommodations pursuant to the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988. Entertain a motion to remove this item from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Tildenburn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
Doran?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Rasmussen?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Okay. Steve Britzman, our city attorney, will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I've prepared a brief statement just to cover a few of the points that I think are important, and so I can be brief because I think the public understands this ordinance to a significant degree. But this would be, this was discussed 2 weeks ago at the first hearing of this ordinance. And we are recommending approval of this ordinance establishing reasonable accommodations pursuant to the federal laws, the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, in order to provide a procedure which will allow those with disabilities a fair hearing if a request for reasonable accommodation is made to the City of Brookings. And we presently do not have that procedure in our ordinance, and it is necessary. I would comment that the objective with this reasonable accommodations ordinance is to establish a procedure for an application process for those who request reasonable accommodation and a hearing, which both of those should occur as soon as the law and due process will permit. And enforcement procedures that have been mentioned tonight were commenced several months ago, and further enforcement steps were taken very recently, even subsequent to the last council meeting. However, it's important that those enforcement actions be suspended because the city's received a reasonable accommodation request, and it's important that we have a well-thought-out ordinance and procedures to consider requests for reasonable accommodation and a fair hearing where the public can comment and everyone can participate, and those with disabilities have all of the rights that the federal law would permit. Again, staff and legal counsel recommend approval. If there is or are any changes made to this proposed ordinance tonight, there would need to be a additional hearing of this ordinance. So if there's an amendment proposed by any council member, an additional hearing should be held on this particular ordinance. And again, I would expect that if this procedure is adopted, that the hearing will be held as expeditiously as possible under the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. The motion on the floor from the 9/10/2024 City Council meeting reads, a motion was made by Councilmember Wendell, seconded by Councilmember Avery, that ordinance 24-031 be approved. I open the public hearing on this item. Is there any public comment on this item?
Hi, Kara Bianchi-Rossi again. I appreciate all your city council members' time and consideration and really looking at this thoroughly. My only concern is, what are we going to do when they don't apply? How are we going to enforce that? Because they have lived there illegally for 5 months and no enforcement has been done in the meantime. They asked for the reasonable accommodations, and they had already lived there illegally for several months with no enforcement of our current zoning ordinance. And I stand here looking at all those all the ordinances coming up today, and I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't I just go build something over there with a drive-through? Because apparently nothing's going to be done if I do it. So those are my concerns, and as the neighboring person to this home, it is a great concern to me and my children who live there.
Steve, you want to respond?
I meant to mention that since the last hearing on this ordinance, we did look very carefully at our existing ordinances with respect to enforcement, remedies, penalties, and we feel that we have comprehensive remedies available both in Chapter 1 of the city ordinances, I believe it's Section 1.8, as well as the rental housing has a comprehensive set of enforcement procedures, which at the last council meeting I forgot to mention or was not thinking about. There are also other remedies that are available under state law that are not contained to address violations of city ordinances that we would be able to utilize. So we feel like we have appropriate remedies for violations.
And can you explain why they haven't been taken action of when I know they have in the past?
Well, a request was made for reasonable accommodation.
When was that request made?
It was made, I would say, early part of July, if I'm not mistaken.
And they lived here since March 15th?
Correct. I can't speak for the intervening time period.
Any other public comment on this item?
Good evening. I've lived in this same home, 802 4th Street, for approximately 46 years. In those times, I always left my keys in my car, and I mean always. Things were different. Beth will tell you that this has been a great neighborhood with great people, and it still is. Back then, the biggest things that happened where the college kids always came after closing time, threw a few beer bottles, put my garbage can on my 72 Thunderbird, and made a lot of noise. The Finns lived 2 doors down, And once Mrs. Finn was locked in her bathroom all night, waiting for the student to wake up and leave. Unfortunately, times are really different now. I guess one thing I'd like you to think about is there a possibility that we have liability by not enforcing our laws? Have you talked about that? Anybody?
Legal counsel has reviewed the liability issues, Tom.
And with what result?
Well, we've considered the liability issues. We've considered those that seek reasonable accommodation, and we're attempting to reconcile or address both of those concerns.
Okay, so I live on 4th Street, would be our front door. Our garage is on the alley. I have 13 grandchildren. What happens if my grandchild gets run over when the city is not following the law, their own law? Has that been discussed? Would there be any exposure if we were following the law?
People responsible for accidents always have exposure. But beyond that, it's really difficult to determine.
Would that be the city then that would have that exposure?
Primary responsibility rests with the person who causes an injury to another party, directly causes it, to be honest.
What if it was caused because there were 7 people in that house?
There could be potential liability, I suppose, if the cause was related to the conduct of those people.
I think we're dealing in a lot of hypotheticals. Right now is an opportunity to hear the individual in a public forum. If you want to visit later, I think that'd be a great opportunity.
Okay, that's fine. I hope you think about it. Now we have 7 people unrelated recovering in an Oxford home with federal disabled status. Oddly enough, they're being allowed to stay in this house without license or challenge or arrest. I don't know why, but I do know several of them have been picked up and hauled away by law enforcement. Don't misunderstand me. I've enjoyed meeting some, and I know it's not their fault. As I understand it, the city has no responsibility for what they do or where they go. I've asked 2 times for the city to slow down and stop what they are doing. They've ignored me except for the second reading. They tabled the ordinance. And now, what a difference a week makes, it's all changed again. It looks like tonight you're going to pass the new ordinance and move on. Still no slowing down and talking to explain things and listening to hear what we need to say. You've told us very little and listened even less. This needs to be at a full meeting and with all the players. Oddly enough, I ran across the notice of public hearing published by the city to consider an option of a revision of ordinance entitled Ordinance Reasonable Accommodations Pursuant to the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, at which time and place all persons interested will be giving a full, fair, or for goodness sakes, complete. My time is almost up for the sake of this neighborhood and whoever else may be interested. I ask for reasonable accommodation to a full and fair and complete hearing in the coming weeks with all the interested parties. It's still not too late. Thank you.
Is there any other comments or questions from the public? Close the public hearing. Does council have any questions or comments? Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the questions that I had as I looked over the ordinance sort of echoes the question that Kara asked, which is if we have a potential applicant that we believe is currently enjoying accommodations, prior to the completion of the application, which is cited in, I think, Part C, how long do they have to submit an application? So if we were to pass this ordinance after the second hearing, we believe there's someone in the community enjoying the accommodations already that they're requesting, but we don't receive an application from them using our official means, which is identified in Section C. Do we define a timetable before we have to proceed with other action?
They would have the 15 days prior to the hearing to submit that application. So the plan would be to make the request as soon as the ordinance is adopted, if the council adopts it.
So we would establish a hearing date whether we receive an actual application from them or not? We would tell them when we would consider or schedule a hearing. I mean, it's up to the party to submit an application form. And if they don't submit the application form, then the hearing could not be held. Right. So my question is, if they don't submit an application, what triggers are? I think my thought process is passing this ordinance, expediting the second hearing so that it is in place, and we hold a hearing as soon as possible after the ordinance is in place, but all of that is dependent upon an individual submitting an application according to Section C. And if they don't submit the application, we don't have a hearing to schedule, and what happens next?
Yes, we would take appropriate action to address any pending violations on the property. And that might be a variety of different strategies that we might employ.
And just to clarify, that's because we've received a request for reasonable accommodations. By council passing the ordinance, they then can hold a hearing requesting that application to hear their request for reasonable accommodation, correct?
Well, I guess simply stated, if the ordinance is passed, we have a procedure to consider an application. They have requested reasonable accommodation, but to properly consider reasonable accommodation, we need factual information submitted in the form of an application. And then the hearing would be scheduled according to the terms of the ordinance.
Okay. My fear is that once again, they're sort of in the driver's seat because we believe that they are currently enjoying the accommodations, but we cannot schedule a hearing until they submit an application requesting us to allow them to enjoy the accommodations.
Correct. We can identify a date, a proposed date for the hearing, and that won't unduly delay things because we can tell them when we would schedule the hearing. And while the application we're waiting for, has not been received, we can alert them prior to the effective date of the ordinance of the proposed hearing date. And that should provide sufficient time to submit the application and to hold the hearing if, in fact, we receive that application.
Councilmember Specker.
So you had mentioned 15 days, so the application has to be in 15 days before the date of the hearing?
Correct.
So if we set a date for the hearing and we don't have an application 15 days before the hearing, can we then proceed with solving this problem?
I believe so. We would not have that hearing. And of course, hearings scheduled in court, in a court of law, oftentimes those are rescheduled or terminated if they're not deemed to be necessary.
Councilmember Tiltonburn.
If we were to move forward with this and they did not submit an application, would it not be true that they would then no longer be actually requesting an accommodation? And therefore, we could then take a few steps back and enforce the rules that are currently on the books?
That would be correct.
So if they didn't submit their application, then we'd maybe actually have a stronger ability to enforce the current rules without even needing a reasonable accommodation hearing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from council? Councilmember Wendell.
I have a question about timing. We have to hold a second hearing before we can take action on this revised version. How many days have to pass if we were to have we're doing the first reading of this revised version tonight. How many days have to pass before we can schedule the second hearing?
If you make any significant amendments tonight, then 5 days have to pass before you can give it the additional required reading.
Councilmember Tilton Burn.
Second hearing of,
sorry.
do we not need to do a second hearing of this revised version that we're considering this evening?
No, this would be the second reading of the ordinance. We've had the first reading.
Okay.
And so this would be the final reading unless there is any proposed change to this ordinance tonight. And if there is a proposed change, then the earliest that you can have the required final reading would be 5 days from now.
Councilmember Tilton Burn.
So as a clarification on that, currently we have a motion on the table that's been removed from being tabled, right? We have a motion that was from the previous meeting that was to pass the original ordinance. I believe our packet tonight includes both the original ordinance and the revised version. So the motion on the table is to pass the original version. If we wish to pass the version that is revised in our packet, what motions need to happen at this point in order to shift to that version?
Your motion would need to identify the proposed change. There'd have to be a second, public comment on the proposed change, council comment, and a vote on the proposed change, and then a final vote to approve it as revised. And then a subsequent hearing would be scheduled no earlier than 5 days after tonight.
So I would request that we amend the ordinance that's being considered to the amended version that's included in our packet. I believe that version includes a second reading date of October 8th, but I'd like to request that we expedite that to be as soon as possible, which I believe would be 5 days from tonight's meeting.
5 days
After tonight's meeting.
So is there a second on that?
Second.
All right. Been moved and second. Is there any public comment on this item? Council, questions, comments? Councilmember Wendell.
One question I had on a proposed change is under Section D, letter B, it's the notification radius, and we would increase that to 250 feet of the property in question. We would have the ability to notify a broader radius than 250 feet if we want to. 250 is the, say, minimum, is that the, am I
That would be
understanding that
correct.
correctly?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? And so we're voting on just the amendment. All right, correct. Please call the roll on the amendment.
Avery,
Aye.
Doran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Rasmussen,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tilton Burn,
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Okay. Then do we go to the original then?
So
Any other public comments on the original
as amended.
as amended? Council members, questions, comments? Councilmember Tilton Burn.
So at this point, given the fact that it's been amended, we're not actually voting on passage. We'd be voting on having an additional reading on the amended version, correct?
No, you've amended the ordinance, and so you need to complete the second reading of the ordinance as amended with a subsequent vote.
And then have a third reading as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Please call the roll.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery,
Aye.
Doran,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Rasmussen,
Aye.
Specker,
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
So would we have a special meeting then this coming Monday night possibly?
I think it'd be appropriate for a council member to schedule with a formal motion for the next reading of this ordinance.
Can we do that now?
Yes.
Please.
I would move to hold a special meeting on Thursday, October 3rd, to conduct a third reading of this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, council questions, comments? Councilmember
I
Tildenberg?
just want to clarify real quick. Did you say October 3rd?
I did, but I'm open to other.
Steve, 5 days from tomorrow, is that including the weekend? Or does that, okay, so the soonest that council could actually hear it would be Monday, the 30th?
Correct. We wouldn't count tonight. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those are the 5 intervening days. So the earliest date would be Monday.
I would revise my motion to Monday, the 30th.
And I am comfortable with that as well.
Okay, any public comment on this item? Council, any comments, questions? Councilmember Wendell will be running that meeting. I will be out of town that evening, so my blessings. All right, please call the roll.
Doran.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Rasmussen.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Okay, we have the city progress report from our Assistant of the City Manager, Samantha Beckman.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is the 2024 September Progress Report. In Public Works, the Engineering Division has several ongoing projects, including the University Boulevard and 22nd Avenue sewer improvements, which are now substantially completed. The street maintenance and overlay project is progressing well and is on schedule for an October finish. The Western Avenue Bridge and Culvert replacement has started last week with a mid-October completion date, and BMU also has several ongoing projects, including the 20th Street South project that is mostly complete at this point, just a few warranty items that they're finishing up, but expected to be fully completed before winter. The 34th Avenue project, also BMU's, is expected to be completed in November, and 34th Avenue is now open from 6th Street as far north as Cook's Waste Paper and Recycling. The Solid Waste Division is in their implementation phase of the Solid Waste Master Plan. The leachate force main design is progressing well, and staff is working with the contractor and BMU right now on the pipeline routing and lift station design. Groundbreaking is planned for spring of 2025 for that project. The parking lot pavement out at the landfill is scheduled for October. And last week we had a consultant on site to start that staff operational gap analysis, which would show us where our operations can become more efficient. The contractor for the landfill equipment building is also expected to start within the next 2 weeks. Congratulations to Officer Lisa Walterman on her graduation from the South Dakota Law Enforcement Training Academy. There, she received a challenge coin from her peers, as well as recognition with the Class Leadership Recognition Award. Officers conducted several underage drinking initiatives at various bars and restaurants around town, aimed at curbing illegal alcohol consumption and promoting safety and compliance with local laws. The Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over social media campaign was also run as a part of our ongoing efforts to crack down on impaired driving and keep the roads safe. And staff provided security at a number of community events, including Downtown at Sundown and the Billy Currington concert that was out at the Dakota Bank Center. Staff also had the opportunity to serve a meal at the local harvest table and also attend the Hometown Heroes event, which was hosted by SDSU and was an event it was a part of an initiative dedicated to recognizing and honoring the contributions of first responders in the community. The Brookings School District and SDSU are both back in session now, which means that the police department has been more active with things like breakfast with badges, working football games, and then helping out with several other events happening both on campus and at the school. The Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department has been busy this month National Recreation and Parks Association Sustainability and Practice Meetings. These are 8 sessions, in-depth conversations about the best practices in sustainability for parks and recreation. Department Director Kristen Zimmerman was elected to the South Dakota Parks and Recreation Association Board as the Professional Development and State Affiliate Chair. The Activity Center has had a lot of activities and trips, but Mayor Niemeyer and several council members attended an event proclaiming September as National Senior Center Month. We had many members of the Activity Center attend, and several shared personal stories on how the center has positively impacted their lives. Forestry crews have been busy working on the shelter belt between Solventum and the Edgebrook Golf Course. They are working to eliminate the ash trees, and in 2 days, they had over 100 ash trees cut down, and staff has been taking that ash wood out to the landfill to be processed. Crews will plant trees back into the shelter belt once the removals are completed there. Staff has been working with Artisan Concrete to have concrete cornhole targets placed at the horseshoe pits at Hillcrest Park. And the Larson Ice Center has seen some improvements to the skate room and new flooring in the lobby. The pickleball courts also had their ribbon cutting last week with just a few punch list items that need to be finished up this fall. The library had their 4th annual pet parade, and with 145 people in attendance. Kirk the St. Bernard won Judge's Choice, and Tortellini the Tortoise won the Community Choice Award. And lastly, at the Dakota Bank Center, we're excited for Ashley Bigger, who has stepped into the role as general manager as of September 1st. They will also be hosting 13 events in September. Highlights include the Brookings High School Cheer and Dance Competition and the Jack's Classic Swine Show. Tickets are now on sale for the Brookings PRCA Rodeo. And I will stand by for any questions.
Thank you, Samantha. Questions, comments from council? Thank you. Okay, go on to the next item. Our next meeting is going to be a study session on October 8th. Right, yeah. Okay, and then regular meeting at 6. Do I have this right? This is our regular stated meeting, right?
Should be a regular meeting on October 8th.
Right, okay. And then, so we'll have board appointment on the consent agenda, students report, ex officio reports, and then obviously the second readings on the 5 items we heard tonight for first readings. Does council have anything they would like to add for an item in future agenda?
Just a note about
Councilmember Wendell?
just a note about the special meeting on September 30th, which will actually be the next time we will convene.
All right. So that'll be on September 30th on Monday night at 6 o'clock?
Correct.
Okay. We're all on the same page. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Thank you. Good night.